Hello again. I'm back on the roof of the parking garage. This time not in the hot July sun, so hopefully the camera won't overheat like last time. Now it's a beautiful bright November day. So let's walk and talk together, enjoying the autumn weather, and talk about the Rio Grande Plan. Recently I released a video that outlines 6 alternative design concepts for the Rio Grande Plan. And I've got a lot of comments about why I didn't include a certain other option as well, a no-build option. This is something often done in big infrastructure projects that creates an impetus for building the project in the first place. Basically saying if we don't build the project, these are the consequences that we'll have to live with. And it gives a good reasoning for why you should build the project, or if the project really deserves to be built at all. We've spent the last 4 years talking about the Rio Grande Plan and why it is needed. So I feel like we've gotten a long way already to saying what the no build option really means. But I think it deserves its own video about why the no build alternative is not something that I wanted to consider for the last video. This will follow basically the 4 points that I made at the end of the live event we did in September. So if you missed that one in person or didn't see the live stream, it's logged away on the YouTube channel, but I'll go over it in some more detail here. That covered 4 basic points, the one being grade separations, the next being housing, the third being pedestrian infrastructure, and the last being intercity rail and why it needs the Rio Grande Plan. So grade separations are when you take the railroad tracks and the roads, which are crossing at the same point, and you separate them. Either the one goes up or down, or the other. Generally it's the road that goes up and over the railroad tracks or down and below the railroad tracks, because cars and pedestrians and cyclists, they can climb much steeper hills than trains can. Trains carry a lot more cargo, a lot more weight, and it's a lot more effort to get them up and over the hills, the same way that cars and trucks can do very easily. UDOT and UTA know that in the future we need to grade separate the entire front-runner route. This is because of the different accidents and service disruptions that happen at railroad crossings. Either someone gets hit or get close to it by the train, or one of the grade crossings fails to work, which means that they need to send technicians out and fix it, and meanwhile the system will be under repair and unreliable. Now on a freeway system, if you have a problem, say in Orem, and that would affect all the people that were traveling through Orem. But if you're a commuter going from Salt Lake City north to, say, Layton, then you're not going to be disrupted so badly by a service disruption in Orem. On a train, it's different. It's very different, because all the trains travel the whole route. That means that every train on the system is going to be delayed. So grade crossings or grade separations are much more important for frontrunner than they are for I-15. And I-15 already is completely grade separated. You never have to worry about a pedestrian or cross traffic getting hit on the freeway, because there's none there. We've built bridges at every single crossing for I-15 all the way, well, it's a freeway for the entire length. And if we want to have the same level of reliability for our trains and transit system, we are eventually going to have to do that as well. Now the part that's going to be most difficult to grade separate, the portion of the network that's going to be the biggest infrastructure challenge, is downtown. And the reason it's going to be so difficult is because there's a lot of crossings. The train station is very close to those crossings, and the freeway is right next to Salt Lake Central Station. That means that you're going to be very limited in what you can do. Like I said before, either the road goes up or down, but in this case the road really can't go up. The freeway is already up. So your other alternative is to dig a hole and put the road and the sidewalk and the cycle lanes in the hole. Now that's not very appealing for a lot of people, for drivers or for pedestrians especially. If your underpasses aren't well lit, well policed, and well maintained, they can become just as restrictive, just as much of an obstacle as a parked freight train. People just aren't going to want to go down into those passageways below the railroad crossings. Now, there aren't really any good mechanisms to make UDOT consider a railroad crossing, at least not the way that you'd expect. You may think that, when there's a certain number of trains, or a crossing spends a certain amount of time that's blocked, then you're going to automatically put in a grade separation project. It doesn't always work like that. Right now, there's about 25 to 30 front-runner trains per day that go through each crossing. There's about the same number of freight and passenger trains on the Union Pacific tracks, so we got about 50 to 60 trains per day per crossing. Now by 2030, UTA will have doubled the number of UTA front-runner trains that go through, increasing service from 30 minutes to 15 minutes. That's a very good thing, but not so good for people in Salt Lake City. With the number of freight trains also increasing because of the inland port, creating more freight traffic, which is also a very good thing. We want more truck traffic moved onto rails, but again, that's just not so good for us in Salt Lake City. What you're going to have by 2030 is about 80 to 100 great activation events per day per crossing. Now that may seem like a lot of crossings, and it is. It's above average. It's above average right now. 50 to 60 is a very busy railroad crossing, but so far there's nothing in the works to get those crossings grade separated. No plans made, because the thing that causes grade separation projects to be considered is not train traffic. It's either congestion of cars, or it's accidents and incidents. Really, if you want to get a grade crossing project separated, the best thing to do, and don't actually do this, but it's to just cause a lot of train accidents, have a lot of cars in the way, have a lot of fatalities, get people's attention that way, and then the transportation leaders will figure it's time to do something. Without those kind of accidents and fatalities, you're not going to have grade crossing projects, grade separation projects scheduled in until basically you do. We have a very reactive form of government and planning here in the United States, and it doesn't look ahead with foresight for a lot of things. It basically is designed to only act when there is a need to act. And that's good for a lot of things. It saves us money on a lot of different infrastructure projects, but it also costs human lives in many ways, not just in accidents and fatalities, but the lost time at railroad crossings as people wait behind parked trains. That's another way. It just costs human lives, just spending them away, being separated from the rest of your community by trains blocking the path. Anyway, the future of grade separation in Salt Lake City, it's not going to be immediate without the Rio Grande Plan. It's not going to be good without the Rio Grande Plan. Like I said before, the only real alternative you have is underpasses, digging a hole, putting people into the hole, having them go down under the tracks and then climb up the other side. That's very different than having a connected community where people stay at surface level, at street level, and the trains go underground. That would be a much preferable solution, but you can only do it if the trains are grade separated at every crossing all at once. And that's because, like I said before, trains don't climb hills very well. The distance from one crossing to another is too short to do a single grade separation project or a single rail underpass for each and every crossing. It has to be done all at once. So, without the Rio Grande Plan and the no-build option, you're going to have a bunch of underpasses through downtown that act as a bigger barrier than even the freeway would, and maybe even as big or bigger than the railroad crossings are now. So, with the no-build option basically means a divided community as far into the future as we can see. Now for housing. It's interesting that we talk about the housing crisis in Utah a lot, but that there's very little housing being built near Salt Lake Central Station. You look at North Temple Street, you look at every part of the Salt Lake Valley, north, south, east, west, there's a lot of housing being built, big apartment complexes. But you'd think a lot of this would be built near transit stations, and especially near something called Salt Lake Central Station. You'd think that the most connected transit station in all of Utah would have a high demand for housing and business next to it. But if you actually go there, and I suggest that you do since most people haven't actually been there in person, if you go to Salt Lake Central Station, you'll notice that there are empty lots just across the street from the station. On the north side, on the south, there's just nothing being built there. It's empty. Why is it so empty? Well, a big part of it is the freeway infrastructure. Another part of it is the roadway network. The grid system breaks down. It's hard to find your way there. There's huge viaducts in the way. The sidewalks end. The negatives of the freeway are so negative that the positives of the transit can't outweigh them. It's just not a desirable place to be. And worse, even though it's called Salt Lake Central Station, it isn't very central. It's on its own little thing out in the middle of a neighborhood that people just generally don't care about. And with the no-build option, the 70 acres that we've identified in the Rio Grande Plan as potential redevelopment, that is, the 70 acres of land that exist underneath and beside the railroad tracks, they will remain railroad tracks for as far as we can see into the future. All that space that's available, about 5 to 10 city blocks worth of new open space where you can build literally thousands of new apartments. All that space will be locked up, unable to be used by humans. It'll be just for industry and just for trains. And that's crazy, since it is not exactly close to downtown, but it's close enough that a lot of people would want to live there if we were to fix up the area and get rid of the trains and the industry. There's so much potential there, and it's just crazy that in the no-build scenario that there'd be no way to use it, none at all, because the tracks would stay where it is. Talking about not being able to get to Salt Lake Central, that leads us to pedestrian infrastructure. It's really fascinating that the street Salt Lake Central Station is built on, 600 West, it doesn't have sidewalks on the east side. You'd think that, like I said, the nexus of all transit and pedestrian infrastructure in the state of Utah, Salt Lake Central Station, you'd think there'd be a lot more people walking around. But there isn't. There's so few people that a sidewalk isn't even warranted, and nobody misses it because basically nobody walks to the train station. It's crazy. How is it that we can call our central station a central station when it just isn't central? The distance or time it takes to walk from Salt Lake Central Station to the Delta Center for, say, a sporting event or the circus, like I went to recently, and that's because the train system, tracks, was having a hiccup. So the train we needed wasn't there. My kids and I, we had to walk to the Delta Center. It took us 25 minutes to get from the central station to the central sporting hub. 25 minutes. Nobody's going to do that regularly. With the Rio Grande Depot, it's only a 10-minute walk to get to the Delta Center or to the Gateway or to Pioneer Park or to the Convention Center. 5 to 10 minutes is not a long way to walk. A lot more people are going to do that. You're really going to be able to get to the station that is more central to downtown, and you're going to be able to walk to places. You're going to feel like you're in the city. If you want to have people take your train, if you want to have people walking around your city, if you want to activate street life, you're not going to do it with this central station location where it is now at 600 West. The Rio Grande Depot promises and it offers to have more activity to the city and have cities be able to develop in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. In the no-build scenario, you're going to have a lot more parking garages because transit will still be unattractive. More people are going to want to walk or drive their cars, and you're going to have more place to house these cars. You can reduce the parking minimums with the Rio Grande Plan because more people will take the train. I think that's just basically clear. It seems pretty obvious to me. The last is intercity passenger trains. UTA will be, the FRA is looking at ways to bring more Amtrak service to Utah. That's officially going to happen someday. Well, not officially. It's officially being looked at as an option. There's also other efforts to have more state-supported trains to closer destinations, say southern Utah or the Moab area. And people are really looking to ways to bring more rail service to Salt Lake City. And this may sound like a big dream for a state that's so small. I mean, we are the 30th most populated state. We're not even the upper half. But however, our traffic situation is pretty unique. I-15 is one of the major north-south corridors in the Mountain West, or in the West at all. It's one of a very few freeways. It's actually, through Salt Lake City, the 20th busiest freeway segment of any freeway in the United States. 20th. So the 30th most populated state has the 20th busiest freeway. That's interesting. We also have frontrunner commuter trains, which are the 10th busiest, 10th most used commuter rail system in the country. And all this is just because we are arranged between the lakes and the mountains. We don't have a lot of space to develop. It's a very constrained, narrow corridor. And so transit and freeways and all these single line systems, they get overused, they get overbooked. We need more diversity in our transportation modes. These are struggles that other similarly sized states and communities don't have, which is to say, we can't be just followers on this. Our state, Utah, needs to be a leader in alternate and diverse transportation modes, such as passenger rail. So if we want more passenger trains, and we need more ways for people to get around, how do we get more passenger trains? Well, let's look at the most recent example of new passenger rail service. That would be the Amtrak Borealis between Chicago and St. Paul Union Station. St. Paul Union Station is an interesting example because, like the Rio Grande Depot, it spent a lot of years not connected to the national rail grid or network. Trains did not stop there for Minneapolis and St. Paul. There was a station called Midway that was halfway between those two cities. It took a lot of community support for projects to finally happen where the station was restored to rail service. And one of the things that prompted people to restore it to rail service, not just it was a historic building, but that a central station promised to be better for business in the downtown St. Paul area. If you have the business leaders behind you, you can do a lot of different things. They get the attention of the politicians, and they can generally get what they want. They wanted more passenger rail service to the station. Because more passengers to the station meant more people in the downtown. That's better for business. And this goes to show that transportation funding is a little bit backwards than it used to be. It used to be that a passenger train made money on its own. The conductor would take the tickets, the money would go to the railroad company, and the railroad company would make its money moving people on the trains. These days, it's a little different when the federal government continues to subsidize air travel, and it subsidizes highway travel, and it subsidizes bus travel, and all these things are subsidized. Amtrak subsidized. Nothing in the transportation world is acting in a free market anymore. All of this is done to stimulate and promote economic growth in certain areas, in certain cities. Where they think more people need to go, then they subsidize the transportation to get there, either by building freeways or by improving airports or other things. Is to say that transportation is a means to an end. What is the end? The end is to develop more economic growth in Salt Lake City. And clearly Salt Lake Central Station isn't doing that, and most likely it won't. The trajectory of Salt Lake Central Station is not so good. People don't want to go over there. They can't get over there. There's too many bridges. The Rio Grande Depot blocks the way, and it's just not going to be the center of the city. And like, again, we talk about centering a city on transit. We're not going to recenter Salt Lake City on Salt Lake Central Station. We can bring transit closer to where downtown is. That is to say, we can move the transit from Salt Lake Central Station to the Rio Grande Depot. And by doing that, it would make it closer and more accessible to more people downtown. You can have more people come on trains to different events downtown. You can take people where they want to go. And that's basically, you have to do that if you want a good transportation business. Take people where they want to go. Nobody wants to go to or through Salt Lake Central Station. If you want more passenger trains, it starts at the Rio Grande Depot. So I hope I can say that the no-build option is pretty clearly not sustainable. If you go with the no-build option of not doing something, not building the Rio Grande Plan or one of its design alternatives, what's going to happen is you're going to spend years sifting through, or rather if you don't build the Rio Grande Depot, you're going to have years of just collecting data of how many accidents happened, how many people were killed, how many hours were spent wasted at railroad crossings. If you don't build the Rio Grande Plan, you're going to have all that housing potential not used, and housing prices will continue to go up in Salt Lake City as people look for other places to go that aren't Salt Lake City to build their apartments, to build their houses, to build their homes, to build their futures. If you don't build the Rio Grande Plan, people aren't going to walk around Salt Lake City the same way that they would if you did. You're not going to have the active sidewalks and the active streets. You're not going to have the active cycling culture that you could have if people can take their bike to the train very easily and get wherever they need to go in the valley or around the state. And last of all, you're not going to have the same kind of passenger rail network. Maybe things will limp along a bit and you'll have trains stopping at Salt Lake Central Station. That's the triple wide trailer they've got there. Oh boy, well, that would be great. All the people who come from out of state to ride a train over the beautiful Soldier Summit over to Colorado and into Moab or down to St. George, and the only way they can get there is by waiting at the triple wide trailer. Great. I don't think many people are going to do that. But you're not going to have the same support from politicians either. Who's going to want to fund a train to that place? Who's going to want to embarrass Salt Lake City that way? That's not a way to do it. But if you have the Rio Grande Depot as a source of pride and say, people should come through here, they should see the good things we're doing at the Rio Grande Depot, they should see the good things we're doing in downtown Salt Lake City, that changes the narrative. It flips it completely. So yeah, the no-build alternative is no good future. It's not a way to go. I think you can see that clearly as I do now, that we need the Rio Grande Depot. We need the Rio Grande Plan. One way or another, through one of the different alternatives presented, we need to do something, preferably before the next Olympics, but anytime will help, because we just can't have that future be our future. I'm Christian Linhart. Thank you for watching.